So we would like to welcome to the Grounded podcast today former Montana Governor Marc Racicot. He also led the Republican National Committee. He's done everything. He was Attorney General. He chaired the George W. Bush reelection campaign. He's been a vocal critic of President Donald Trump, which actually led to the Montana Republican Party censuring him in 2023. And I know you have something to add, Senator.
Well, look, the first time I got to know Governor Roscoe, he was governor. And I had just been elected to the legislature in the 1998 election. And a guy who was a minority leader in the state Senate, a guy named Steve Doherty, invited me to come down as one of the three or four or five people that met with the governor every week. One of those weeks, he invited me to come down. Now, this guy was a larger than life figure to me. Had watched him for years and years, had watched him, and I'm going to give you credit for this, whether you want to take it or not. Watch him really take the state from a state that was primarily blue to a state that was pretty damn purple, if not red, and did some amazing things in office because, quite frankly, uh, from my perspective, he was a communicator. He let people know what he was doing. He was approachable. And the reason that we were there as legislators was because the governor wanted to get our input and wanted to give us his input on how things were going during the session. And I just, whether I agreed with you on the issues or not, really wasn't what was important. What was important there is we were having a conversation about policies, and it was a respectful conversation, and a little debate on it to figure out how the schedule was going to go. And I've never ever forgot that. And I've always appreciated that about you, Mark Roscoe, in that you were always open, you were always honest, and you were always forthright and truthful. And what the hell else could you want from your public servant? I mean, truthfully, I mean, nobody's going to agree on everything. Hell, I've been married for a long time now, well, damn near 50 years, and my wife and I only agree on about, I used to say 70%, but I think we're down to 65%, It's Anyway, that's all I wanted to add. It's good to
That's
have
a
you.
long introduction. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Senator, for your kindness. We had very productive time together. It wasn't near long enough, but after you ascended to the United States Senate, we had multiple opportunities to engage in business common and of interest to the people of Montana. So you taught me a lot of lessons about how to conduct oneself and be principled and focused. And so we've enjoyed now almost a 30-year relationship, John. That's very, very important to me.
Yeah, well, it's also important to me. Let me start with where Maritza started a little bit, and then we'll kick it back to her for some fun stuff. But in my introduction to you, I said something that I really believe. I think it was your actions during the '90s that moved Montana to a state that was more conservative, more purple, more red, if not red. But yet, a few years ago, um, you making the calls as you do because you analyze situations, you make the call as you see it. You evidently said something or made something, and I think it had a lot to do with the first term of President Trump. That the Montana Democratic Party said, you know what, we don't
Republican
really,
Party.
or
Republican.
Republican Party said, we thank you very much for that Freudian slip. The Republican Party said, we don't really care about what you've done in the past. Right now, we don't particularly like what you're saying, so we're going to boot your ass out. How did you see it from your position of being somebody who was head of the RNC, right? I mean, weren't you pretty much the head of the RNC?
Well, I was, but the president, of course, had ultimate authority.
Yeah.
George W. Bush is the one that asked me to do it, and members acquiesced, and so I was in the chair for a couple of years, but it was at the behest and urging of President Bush. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think I get your point. That for me, John, I don't feel like I've changed one bit in 35 years. I, was not overly partisan from the very beginning. Neither have you been. And We have a set of beliefs and we participate in a party and we try to shape it in a way that reflects the priority of issues that we think are important. But at the end of the day, I think both of us have recognized you don't get everything you want every day. And what this is really all about is trying to aid and abet the people you live with, work for, and love get to a good place. And sometimes that depends upon some conservative ideals or those that the Democratic Party has advocated. And I come from a mixed marriage anyway. My father was a good, strong Democrat who adored Mike Mansfield. And, I met him when I was a child. And he was a Roosevelt Democrat. You could understand clearly why. They didn't wear their politics on their sleeve then. It was something that they were interested in. They believed in. They voted. They were good citizens, but it wasn't life or death that you do it my way or it's the highway every single day. And you can see the downsides of that kind of a philosophy presently. I mean, a lot of Republican senators in the United States Senate, probably all of them, more than I do. But not long ago, I went through trying to tabulate the number, write down the names of those that I had worked for to get elected or recruited or tried to raise money for. And I don't ever recall that we had to go through a litmus test of ideas or issues before they were willing to accept my help and assistance. And the same was true in reverse. And there are still 10 of those people serving in the United States Senate. And they were good people. They were solid people of conscience and conviction, and they spoke their minds. And they ultimately, at the end of the day, I think reflected their individual states exceptionally well. But I cannot get any of them to react. They will not break away. I do not understand this adhesive that holds them so tight when they know that things are wrong. They can feel it. There's no rhythm. There's no stability. It's not predictable as it was when you first entered the Senate. And of course, you went through this last war, which was brutal, angry, bitter, full of vengeance and accusation that was totally and completely untrue at the end of the day, and spent, a $250 million or more on destroying everything that you had done. Well, if that's American democracy, then as my dad used to say, I'm a jet pilot. That's not even close to democracy. And that's really what my beef has been all along is, look, this is a delicate assemblage that we have. We care about each other. We take care of each other. Nobody asks you if you're helping pull somebody out of a mud-stricken wheat field, whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican. You take care of each other. And really, it was one of the primary reasons for the formation of the democracy in the first place. So anyway, I'll be 77 in a month, and I have no guilt about anything that I have done. Well, some things, but I can't confess those things right at the moment. Politically, I have no regret about anything. Um, and so that's why you and I are friends, because you see the world much the same as I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is that, and you know this, people end up arguing about 10 or maybe 15% of the issues that are out there, when in fact we agree on 85% of them. And we'll get into campaign finance in a minute, but I think that's really driven people to the far right and the far left, and work doesn't get done in the middle. Um, Go ahead, Maritza. I'll just keep asking. No, go ahead.
Well, I just I've known you, Governor, for several years now. We serve on the board of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center together, and I've had so many conversations with you, but this is the very first time I ever thought about it in that term. I mean, if I know you and I have talked about what it was like to previously serve as the head of the RNC and then to be censured by your own party, but I never thought about the fact that you have helped so many of the people in power right now get to where they are, and you can't reach them. That must be incredibly frustrating.
Well, it's disappointing. I think I understand the dynamics of it. Um, and it's only human. I mean, we always want to belong to groups that we think are a part of our life, our history. We want to bind those connections one to another and see them prosper. But in politics, at the end of the day, quite frankly, there has to be a certain amount of freedom and immunity that members in both parties accord to one another to do what they think is right on a given occasion without being punished. But that's not how this person who is occupying the White House temporarily sees things. Vengeance and the pursuit of pressure from any place that he can possibly put it on people to get what he wants every single day, and nothing else is what has contorted and twisted our politics and made it so brittle and angry. Of course, the internet has contributed its own downsides, but that's a whole nother question. Um, but I've never, I mean, I expected it. In 2016, when I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post, I knew there would not be a host of people who were jumping on the ship, and so um, to me, what I did then, what I have done since, and even before, I've lost a lot, Maritza. I lost the first three races I was involved with, kind of made me fearless about losing, and so as a consequence of that, I just never felt that I had to bind myself to an issue or to a campaign that I didn't believe in. And if that's how others see it, it's sad and unfortunate. And I think it's a potential cause for ruination of the democracy because when you have people that were elected in the United States Senate, a position of extraordinary importance and critically involved virtually everything that goes on in the country, and they cannot pursue what it is that they think is right for the right reasons at the right time, then you are crippling the capacity of the United States Senate to be a contributing factor to a democracy based upon consent and the pursuit of truth, and ultimately trying to make certain that we live in a place that's bound by unity. So at the end of the day, it's a disappointment. I wasn't surprised because it had happened sometimes before. You know, frankly, when I was at the RNC, it happened. Um, I mean, George Bush told me, go out, go every place and talk with people about our philosophy. And compassionate conservatism to him was not a slogan. It was a political approach to solving problems. And that's what attracted me. It had some conservative leanings, but with a conscience, with a heart. And that's why the country is formed in the first place. It's not all about whether or not this is a part of our core performance requirements. It's about whether or not, as a people, we can live freely because we respect each other and take care of each other. So um, I'm not the least bit embarrassed about it, and I'm not. I hold no grudges. I'm saddened that some of these people I so deeply respected and liked so much can't find the courage to stand up, and that I think is a horrible disappointment. And frankly, but it's not just confined to them, Marisa. It's confined to the titans of business too. Where the hell are they? What are they doing in terms of standing up for principle? If they don't do what's right for the right reasons in this country, they're not going to have to worry about their bottom line because the entire group of known as democracy is going to fall apart because it's based on consent. Sorry to be so long.
No,
You knew you were getting into this,
That's the beauty of a podcast. We can
let's,
go as long as we want. Go ahead,
um,
wait,
Senator.
but
wait,
that's
no,
what we paid the
3
price
minutes.
for. That's what I paid a price for. That's what John paid the price for sticking up for
Yeah,
principle. And
I
so,
think, I think, I think, Governor, I think a proof point on what you just said about destroying, if you've got a different opinion about something. I just read today where Representative Massey, I think he's out of Kentucky. I don't know him. He still serves in the House, said that he was upset because they didn't get congressional approval for the bombing. And the president's response was we got to run him out of the party. I mean, really? I mean, if that's the litmus test on everything that comes down the pipe, it's going to be a pretty small party after a while. I mean,
yeah.
really, it's
Well, I
pointless.
think your prediction is correct over time. It may not be within the time I'm allowed on the planet Earth, but it will ultimately fall apart because it can't endure of that kind of intellectual and spiritual corruption.
Yeah. So, I gotta ask you. So we've got 3 former presidents. It kind of falls into the same line on war of the people in industry, but let's talk about the 3 former presidents. And I know they've got a tremendous respect for the office of presidency, Clinton and Bush and Obama. Um, you gotta know that those folks know that things aren't happening the way they should be happening in the Oval Office. They gotta know that I mean, I think all 3 of those folks prided themselves on picking people around them that were smarter than them, and you gotta know that isn't happening. Where are they? Why haven't they spoke up? Is there something that I'm missing on that? And I know you had a great relationship, and I hope you still do with George W. Bush. Um, why haven't they stood up? Is it because of respect for the office? Is it because that nobody's ever spoken illy of a president, a former president, or what is it?
Yeah, it's a mystery to me too. It's a very sad mystery to me. I'm heartbroken that they cannot come together and even issue a joint statement about what it is that has gone wrong, because they know in their hearts that something is there. Now, Obama has been somewhat operative, and Clinton a little less so, but certainly has let his thoughts be known, at least on the periphery, once or twice during this debacle and this time of trial. And George, I think, or President Bush has also tried to do some things, but they've been soft. In politics, what do they call them? Soft ads and hard ads. They haven't really approached being soft, surpassing the soft judgment yet. And that's a question I have too. I mean, my God, can you not see? I say to myself, what it is that's happening to our country, and can you not see the falling apart as it is day by day, and stand up cohesively of transcending politics? See, to me, this is about what's your hierarchy of values as a human being, as an American. And to me, the highest value you have to vindicate is dedication to your country and its good health and its democracy and its way of life. That's it. That is the ultimate question you have to answer with every single issue you confront. Now, if something happens in your party that happens to coincide with the Constitution and the life of your democracy, well, that's wonderful. That's a nice, happy coincidence. But if it doesn't, in my view, you have to choose your country. You have to choose your Constitution. And it's just crystal clear. And Mike Mansfield, who I know you admired so much as I did, and Marisa did as well. At the end of the day, that was his life. That was his legacy. He was so humble and so thoughtful. And of course, he didn't have to contend with the internet and all of these raging communications and all of this vengeance born out of electronic communication. But still, even if he had to, he would have never engaged. I'm absolutely confident of that. And that quiet humility and effectiveness is what led he and Dirksen to be able to accomplish all the things they did. From the first nuclear treaty to getting us through the assassination of Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, through the Democratic Convention of '68, through the arrest of, the impeachment of Richard Nixon. So, and all done with stability. Not once during those years did I think the country's falling apart. And yet, a Democrat and Republican who loved the country and had fought for the country more than they loved themselves or their position. And that's what's missing. I mean, you have to be able to cast your fate to the wind. One example, John, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I was involved in drafting the brief to disqualify Trump from even being a candidate. I mean, the law was clear. It's absolutely clear. And we can go into the theories about what happened to the court. How did they fall apart? How did they wander off into oblivion and not do the right thing that they knew was right on another day? But at the end of the day, I helped do the brief in the Supreme Court. And got a hold of all my old compatriots, most of them, the overwhelming majority of them, and the Republicans, and asked them. And you know how many people who agreed to do it? There were three people that offered to do it. I was one of them. I wrote the brief. Bill Weld in Massachusetts and Christy Todd Whitman in New Jersey. That's it. And so in my communications, I would ask, how can you put up with this? How can you let this happen? And, or why can't you do it? And, there are all kinds of explanations. None of them carry the day, in my view, like, well, we need to let democracy play itself out. Well, that would be good if you had everybody that was ethical, absolutely got an A on the report card for ethics playing the game, but we don't. These, these minion or henchmen that accompany, Donald Trump like acolytes around, the Capitol who know nothing about government. He knows nothing about government. At the end of the day, he's not a crackerjack administrator. He doesn't know how to run a government or even how it differs from a business. Um, so we're stuck in this place that not only has incompetence in terms of management, but we're in this place where you have vengeance and extortion and cruel commentary about your neighbors that you live with, that you grow up with, that are citizens of this country. And at the end of the day, um, that's how you destroy democracy because it's based on consent and it's based on good behavior. It asks a little bit of us every day. It's like a four-way stop. Not everybody gets to go all the time. And interestingly, even people with all those flags in the back of their truck with loud pickups streaming around and disobeying traffic laws, they stop at a four-way stop because they have an example about stopping at a four-way stop, and they wanna make sure they get their turn. So even with the people that are selfish, they still stop. And if they don't start treating the Constitution and the democracy like that and being principled, then the whole thing falls apart. I don't know when it happens, but it happens.
I honestly think, and I absolutely honestly believe this, that I don't think a lot of those folks that are doing what they're doing have read the Constitution. I don't
I
think
don't
they've
either.
read it and understand what it says, because it's a remarkable document that is incredibly clear, and you can try to find loopholes, but they ain't there. I mean, tariffs are a prime example. Constitution says it's Congress's job, but yet there are people that serve in the Senate that say, "Oh no, no, the president can do this because he makes up some bogus damn loophole." It's quite frankly, it's unbelievable, and I get a lot of flack, by the way, for saying, and I mean this because I think it's true. The people I serve with on both sides of the aisle are good people. There's a few exceptions to it on both sides of the aisle, but the truth is they're good people. And I have people come up to me all the time and say, "How can you say they're good people when they empower the guy that's in the executive branch and they don't hold him accountable as the Constitution says they need to?" That's You can't answer that question.
Well, John, and you're right, because what it leads to ultimately is rebellion. And
Yeah.
that's what you see in the streets of San Francisco or of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And you see the seeds of dissent turning to destruction over time. So anybody that thinks that you and I are silly, or we don't quite get it, or we're Chicken Little wandering around passing out Chicken Little hats, at the end of the day, they're making a horrible mistake because it can fall apart very quickly. Look what happens with him, with Trump. He ignores court orders. He's got all of these acolytes around him that have never run a government, probably never run business organization. They think they know everything. It's almost they do it with glee. It's almost as if this makes them somehow the exercise of this absolute power happy, just to be going through the exercise. So um, it's danger signals all over, and if we don't get a grip on it, we're gonna be in dire circumstances.
Governor, I know that I mean, you have spent so many years trying to speak up and warn people about what would happen if Trump was reelected, and you're still vocal, you're still out there. You spoke at the No Kings rally in Helena, and that speech is, quite something. I will post a link to it on our Substack because there's so many quotes I could pull from there, but I'm wondering if you could give us, like, a candid look in Governor Marc Racicot's home. Like, what does your morning look like when you are reading these headlines? What is the unfiltered reaction, that your wife gets the benefit of overhearing?
Uh, well, it doesn't we go back and forth. Teresa has her list, I have my list, and we trade back and forth, and we're just mystified. We're so heartbroken that this is what has happened to our country, and we are so sad that we that people can't see what's going on, and we question ourselves and cross-examine ourselves, trying to figure out, do we see this accurately, or are we just being overreactive, or are we too much prone to our own thoughts and won't consider the thoughts of anybody else? So we go through these exercises trying to maintain a healthy scrutiny of what it is we're seeing every day. And frankly, I think most Americans have gotten to the point to where they know they can depend on another outrage tomorrow morning. Um, every day there's another outrage, sometimes 3 or 4 or 5. And, the damage is irretrievable. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take, agriculture, which is something John, he knows a lot of things about a lot of issues, but agriculture, all these young people, these young farmers, I was reading about them yesterday, who have taken up, the administration on trying to secure domestic labor, and of course, they cannot find it. All of them probably in this one county in Colorado I was reading about. John, you probably saw the article. It was in the Post. This young family, um, put everything on the line, and they borrowed money to hire domestic help when they couldn't really find any domestic help. They were promised all of these transfer payments, which, as you know, are huge. And, Montana is one of the top 10 ranking states in transfer payments from the United States government. So, and why is that? Well, when you think about it, farming is not just about one family. Farming is about meeting the human needs of the country. You can't grow wheat and produce every place in America. So the maintenance of it as a common community of interest, all of us, is in our best interest. It's just like going to that four-way stop. And yet, these people who are so blinded by their desire for power in Washington, D.C., and Trump himself, who just cannot deny the attention, doesn't matter if it's negative or positive, as long as you say that's like P.T. Barnum. Doesn't matter whether they hate me or love me, as long as they say P.T. Barnum. And that's pretty much the case with him. But those young people, their wheat last year's crop is probably sitting in warehouses in China because you can't get it into the country. They've got another crop hopefully on the way. Um, what are they gonna do with all of that? How are they gonna get financed for next year's, produce? How does that impact the countries? All of these dominoes are so inextricably interwoven one with another that once you start pulling those dominoes out, the whole thing starts to collapse. And so this we're choking ourselves to death here because we don't have the courage and the capacity to stand up and say enough. And because the people in Congress, I don't know where they're at. I can't find them. I mean, that their offices aren't open. At least they weren't for a long time. I don't know if they are today. They don't answer the phone. They don't answer email. Um, and that's a reflection to me of the extraordinary arrogance of these people because they once got elected without us.
Yeah.
And so they think they can do it every time. And if we don't prove them wrong, we're going to have extraordinary difficulties beyond where we are at this very moment.
And that's a good segue to our next issue, which is campaign finance. But before we go there, I would just tell you that I do you pointed out, I think the key is Congress. And if Congress doesn't do anything to be one of the three co-equal branches of government, and they have been gone. They have been AWOL. We just had Elise Slotkin on here recently, and we talked about this. Congress isn't doing their job. They're just not doing their job. And that isn't the way it used to be, by the way. Robert C. Byrd, when he was in there, or Dick Shelby, it doesn't matter. Those guys understood the role of the three branches of government, and they fought to make sure they had that role, whether it was a Democrat or a Republican in the executive branch. That doesn't exist right now. It just doesn't exist. It's horrible.
You're exactly right.
So I do want to talk about campaign finance. I want to talk about a few things that you're involved in, Governor, because I want to talk like our Republican legacy. This is being dubbed as Shadow RNC. You just joined as chair. So first question, does this mean you still consider yourself a Republican? And second, tell us about this organization. Do you think it has do you think that it can pull the GOP back to the party that you were so active in?
Well, it might sound reckless to some. My approach to the issues is just simplicity, as far as I'm concerned, for me, so I can understand it. I don't care about belonging to a political party, and so as a consequence of that, the judgment. And I mean, to be honest with you, I never voted a straight ballot to begin with, except when I had to in a primary election. I voted for the person, man or woman, who best could do the job, and I don't care when that was. That's what I did. Um, and it wasn't, the politics, Maritza, wasn't so vicious. Just not all that long ago, when it really started to change, and John would notice this being in DC and could be more accurate perhaps than I think it really started to change in like 2006, 2008, with the infusion of the internet into the process and the ability to deploy billions of dollars in campaign finance ads set about and designed to destroy people as a candidate, so that the very day that they finally are sworn into office, they already have been essentially damaged by all the money that goes into trying to call them corrupt and inept. And so I mean, we've got a number of issues here. It's not just the demise of the democracy, which is the premier issue, in my judgment, but campaign finance, tarnishing and making our system mercenary, not an advancement of ideas, not an effort to try and put things into the marketplace and see what's best for the country. It's now about just the power, only the power. I don't even know why they want it. They don't do much with it by the time they get there. Um, so there's a number of things I think merging, and one of them is the internet, one of them is the money, one of them is the lack of true dedication and affection for our way of life. I mean, you've got to love the Constitution. You have to love it, and there's nothing wrong with admitting it. It is the most unbelievable experience in the history of humankind, and we ought to be grateful. And we ought to take care of it. And that ought to be transcending everything else. So when you ask, well, what about the party? Well, I enjoyed being with people, but in the party, but it wasn't so vicious. It wasn't so angry. And the stakes weren't, life or death. Um, when you read the relationship that Mansfield and Dirksen had, they had a glorious opportunity to be of service, and they loved it day after day. And I had that when I was in office. There were a few grumps and cranks here and there, but I was told I was a rhino the first day I was sworn in. And so, names and what do they say? Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Um, nah, nah, nah. There was none of that stuff now that happens on a daily basis. Um, so I'm saddened by that
But
because
this
it's
organization, do you think that it will it do you think that it has the legs to really go the distance and bring the GOP kind of back to the GOP you considered yourself such a big part of?
Well, I have hoped for more speed and more members much more quickly. But, it's a nation of 350 million people, and, it takes a while to turn the ship of state around. Do I believe it? You have to believe it. You have to be optimistic about this country. And so even if I didn't feel I had to, I want to. I want it to be what I knew. I want Montana to be the land of milk and honey, as it was for me growing up, and um, and for my neighbors, and for the people that I raked the church lawn with. All of those things um, were missing. And so, yeah, I think it can. May not be in my lifetime, but if you don't start sometime, you never get back there. And I've been amazed at some of the reaction. Um, I'm never going to run for anything anyway. So at the end of the day, I would just like to see responsible people in both parties quit being snide and arrogant and removed, and focus upon the people they live with and that they're supposed to care so deeply about, and the country they love. So, but I'm not totally unrealistic. I know it's a tough chore, but if I have to work at it, I can't seem to let it go. And so as long as I can keep talking, and as you know, I can do that for quite some period of time.
That's how John Tester feels about doing a podcast with me. It's quite a chore, but he comes and he works at it every day.
I
Well,
do.
he's so good on his feet, and you can tell when he's getting to an end, he has that feeling that he needs to wrap it up way before I do. So
So
that leaves everybody waiting for the next time that John makes a presentation. Sometimes people, I think, when I'm wandering around, they're saying to themselves, "Oh my God, you better get ready for a long sermon."
well, that's a high compliment. But I do think actually we need to probably wrap this up. But
Me too, but I wanna ask
but I
you
do
both about this thing. You talk
okay, go
about
ahead.
it, this Montana thing.
Well, I was gonna ask Mark about it because quite frankly, we were on a Zoom press conference a week ago or so, and there's an effort in the state to put some arms around this corporations or people thing, which I've never bought into and I still don't believe. And I'm just going to be honest with you. And I don't know if it's because he's just that much smarter than I am or that he's an attorney or whatever it is, but he laid out pretty succinctly why this is a good idea and why it should be able to be done and not challenged and not thrown out the door because somebody who still wants to have corporations be people, which is totally bullshit. Anyway,
So let's
do
just
you
do a
want to just
let's just do a primer on this. So this is a state constitutional amendment in Montana. It
yep,
would prohibit corporations from donating to political campaigns, which was, the premise of the Citizens United ruling from the Supreme Court in 2010. I haven't seen official text yet, but you both voiced support in this press call. So, like, tell us, is this the answer? Is this the loophole? Is this the workaround that all states can use to actually end Citizens United and get our campaign finance system back to some kind of reasonable place?
Well, it won't do everything for everybody on a given day. What it does do is what everybody has realized, not everybody, the people in Montana have realized who are working on this, that at the end of the day, corporations obviously are artificial creatures, and they're created by states, and they were competitive. They wanted those businesses in their states so they could tax them. So everybody passed corporation laws, and they were pretty much uniform. And at the end of the day, the powers that each state has can be allocated to individual business entities if they are corporate structures. And the point of that was to save people from losing a lot of money when they made their investment, um, when it was the corporation that actually was the creature through which all the circuits were passing and all the money was being counted. So the law is that a corporation can do only what an individual state within which it is incorporated authorizes them to do. Over the last 100 and some years, those corporate charters and corporate business rules have pretty much grown to be the same, state to state. Delaware jumped out of the blocks and it kind of captured the market. And almost all the corporations in some fashion are incorporated in Delaware. So what this does simply is rewrite corporation law in the state of Montana to say these are the corporate powers that we give to these artificial creatures called corporations. They cannot do anything beyond these specific opportunities to operate as a business entity. And one of the things we're not going to give you, and we're specifically going to withdraw it, is the right to make contributions in campaigns. So if they have the power to let them do business in the first place, they have the power to prevent them from doing business that has nothing to do with being a corporation. And at the end of the day, you're not depriving an individual, a person, a citizen of a constitutional right. You're depriving this fantasy, this artificial creature, of the ability to make a contribution of extraordinary capacity and distort the entire process of communication between people and voters and end their ability to be influential in campaigns. So that's the theory. I think it's a solid theory, and it's so simple. It makes you wonder. Of course, we're such silly creatures sometimes that we don't think of the logic of things first. So that I think is a synopsis. And John can tell me whether I got it right or wrong, but
He
I
muted
think that's right.
himself. I think his phone's ringing as it does. He muted himself, so I'll keep talking while he nods. He's still watching the caller ID. You know, when you live in Big Sandy, you can't rely on cell phones, so you need a landline, Governor. I haven't had a landline in I don't know how many years.
It's my only way of communicating, and it finally quit ringing. But no, you were spot on. I mean, the truth is that I think in the end, you're right. It doesn't do everything for everybody. I think that in the end, I think there will be some Republicans and some Democrats, and some Democrats and some Republicans, and some independents, and maybe some libertarians that don't like this. But the truth is that I think it's good for democracy, and that's really what it's about. It's about making sure that people's voices are heard, not corporations, people, and and it makes it a lot harder for it makes it a lot harder for, quite frankly, politicians to be bought by one entity that has to go back there and be an ideologue for one set of principles. And that's, I think it'll help. I think it'll help heal division, and I think it'll end up with much better policy in the end. But we'll see. We'll see if it makes it through the process. I think Jeff Mangan is kind of the lead dog on this, and he's doing some really good work. And hopefully that works. I want to tell one quick story before we let him go. Can I
Oh,
tell a quick story
is
before we
it
let him go?
embarrassing?
No.
Oh,
It's actually it's why I've liked Mark Roscoe for a long time. So I'll tell you the story. If you want to get on the good side of people, um, treat their kids right. I mean, it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic to human nature. If you treat somebody's kids right, they're gonna give you a break. And my daughter went to school, the same school that Mark Roscoe went to, Carroll College, and she studied nursing. And when Mark and Teresa were in the governor's office, they occasionally had receptions or dinners or whatever you want to call them, and they would hire kids from Carroll College to come up and serve. They'd basically be the waiters and the waitresses. And I thought this was pretty interesting that a Republican governor would hire a Democratic senator's kids to come up, and I don't think they knew who all they were and all they were. But I said to my daughter, if she's 18, 19 years old at the time, I said, "So how was it?" And she said, "Mark and Teresa Roscoe are absolutely the best people that I've ever had to be around. They treated us with incredible respect. They were very appreciative. And they even asked us to come back the next time we did it. They did it." And so, I think that's pretty cool. And a similar situation happened with my son. Happened to sit on an airplane with your wife and got in a great conversation. And he got off the plane and said, "She's one of the finest people I've ever met." So these guys they're just good people. And
Your daughter played the piano for us almost every time in addition. to, all those art shows. That's what they were. Remember when we used to show all that art for Montana Art
Right
inside the
on.
governor's
Yeah,
residence?
yeah.
And she came to play the, piano, and Teresa tells me every time that I better, make certain that I pass on her greetings to that lovely young woman, now a hospital administrator in Indiana, right?
Right, no, that's exactly right. She
And
she got into, mental health care as an RN. She graduated with Carroll with an RN. She went and got her master's, and now she's running a hospital in Indianapolis. And by the way, the best part of this story is that they're on their way over to see us, and they'll be over here in about, a week or so, and,
great.
Yay.
yeah, and it'll be good. Yeah, they left the sweltering heat of Indiana, and they said it was unbelievable, and, of course, Sunday here, it was 53 degrees, so it's 2 different worlds,
Well,
2
I
different.
completely agree with your daughter, and your son, Senator, because every time I've spent any time with Mark and Teresa, I mean, I get teary-eyed. They're gems, like, truly wonderful, wonderful people that you just wanna be around more, so I
You
100%.
both have been very brave to let me on your program. Once you put a microphone in front of me, there's trouble, and you've been very kind and patient, and, I gotta tell you, Senator, you look really healthy and strong to me. Maybe maybe this is a good move.
Well, I mean, I will tell you, and this is the truth. I mean, I figured on spending 12 years. I figured 12 years was probably enough. I spent 18, and I would have been more than willing to spend 24 back there. But the truth is that with the time I spent in the state legislature, with my 18 years in the United States Senate, got to work with some marvelous people, got to represent some marvelous people. 26 years is quite a while, and I loved every minute of it. It was incredibly difficult because there wasn't a lot of time for sleep, but, in the end, I think things worked out just the way they ought to work out. So it's all good.
Hey, you're in the Hall of Fame. That's, a recognition of lasting character and capacity.
You're very
Well,
kind.
Governor, thank you so much. We so appreciate you joining us on this
Well,
podcast.
it's a privilege.
Okay, so we both have Roscoe stories. When he got on the call, he said that you guys worked together before I was in middle school, but that's not true. I was definitely in high school when you worked together first.
Yeah, you weren't. Yeah, you weren't. In 1999, you were a freshman at most,
Yeah,
but you weren't a freshman, you were an 8th grader.
no, I was a freshman.
In the fall of '99.
Yeah, I'm not good at math.
So
Definitely.
one of the things I didn't point out with Roscoe is before I was even sworn in as a state senator, he had put forth a interim group called the Jobs and Income Committee.
Okay.
He took the recommendations of the folks, and I got appointed to that committee before I was even sworn into a state senator. So in the month of December, November, no, it was December, it might have been November and December of 1998. He came down and addressed the committee. It was a joint committee, and it was bipartisan, of course. And we got to do things that hopefully move the economy forward. Worked on a lot of housing stuff and that kind of stuff.
Well, I think it's really cool.
So you literally were an 8th grader. I'm telling you.
In
When did you graduate from high school?
2003. So
Alright.
98, I was
Alright, you were a freshman. Okay, alright.
99, I was a freshman. But, yeah, no, it's great, and I think it goes to the whole thing about why Montana is so special. Like, yes, we have political differences and people, debate things or might not agree on everything, but, I mean, we're all really still Montanans. I hope that's true. I hope that's true.
Yeah, and look, his North Star is the Constitution of the country and the democracy, and, not taking what we have for granted, and not pissing it away, and, he's, he has become a very good friend, let's just put it that way.
He's a gem. He's a gem. Okay, we won't talk about your hat because we recorded this on the same day we recorded our interview with Senator Slotkin, and we already heard the story about the Hawaiian cornflakes, but I'm sure you'll surprise us with another hat on the next episode.
Well, and besides that, there's a nice little tease here. If you watch the episode with Roscoe and you didn't watch the episode with Slotka and you want to know what that, you got to go listen to that episode with
Go
Slotka.
check it out. And I'm going to post some bonus content on our Substack, including the speech he gave at the No Kings rally in Helena on the steps of the Capitol, where he used to be the governor. And looking ahead, we are going to do an entire episode. We've been teasing it for a while on Citizens United. We talked about it a little bit with Governor Roscoe, but we're going to talk a lot more with the leader of End Citizens United and kind of moving forward the future of campaign finance. So we look forward to that. We want to thank everybody for being with us. You can find us on Substack, Instagram, Blue Sky, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much to former Republican Montana Governor Marc Racicot for joining us. Thanks to Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. Easy for me to say. Thanks to you for joining us here today.
LAL.